friends, it's Theresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me discussing the books I read in the month of October, which also happens to be, this is also going to be my wrap up for Trick or Treat-a-thon because I did read a couple books that were not on my TBR and I somehow only missed a book that was not. It's fine. If you guys like this content from me, hit like, subscribe, and comment, and let's just kind of get into it. So, in the month of October, I was a co-host for Readathon, which I have done now for 2 years consecutively, and that is Trick or Treat-a-thon. We do it from October 1st to October 31st. It's all the spooky books combined. This year, it was based around very classic monsters, so fun times. However, I'm going to start off with the 2 books that I did not read for Trick or Treat-a-thon. I was trying to catch up to my Goodreads goal, so I found a couple of audiobooks on Libby that were available that I just listened to while I was on my mini podcast break / at work. But starting off with the 2 books that were not on my TBR for Trick or Treat-a-thon. That first book is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. This is a YA kind of coming of age thing where every year Belly and her mom, and then her mom's best friend and her mom's best friend's 2 kids go to this place every summer to kind of like celebrate and just like have a good time. Those 2 friends, though, however, happen to be not only Belly's best friends, but also 2 people she has interchangeable crushes on. Now, she never really thought that they returned those feelings until about this current book where it's set in, where she turns 16 and suddenly, you know, everything fills out and she's suddenly attractive. You know, she gets contacts, all that fun stuff. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I believe this is a nice start to the series. I think, again, Jenny Han is a good romance writer, but Belly didn't read like a 16-year-old to me. You may be wondering, what does a 16-year-old read like, Therese? Not like Belly. I think that Belly still read a little, like when we used to go to flashbacks, like when she was 12, 13, 14, 15, she read exactly the same across the board. She felt like a 12-year-old to me. There was no indication of change of voice or anything that really made it seem like she was different in any way, and that really came off not only with how her voice sounded, but also in general with how she acted to every single situation that was going on. Again, this is a coming-of-age novel, so I don't know. So I'm sure there is a lot of room to grow, like for Belly to grow. However, I don't know exactly how much room. And on top of that, there are 2 other books in the series. I don't know if I'll be continuing on. I just wanted to read it because I heard it was becoming a TV show. So priorities are clearly here. The next audiobook I read is a sequel, and that is The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is a YA mystery novel following young Stevie Bell, who gets the opportunity of a lifetime to attend a prestigious academy where you study one specific talent of yours, or interest of hers. Hers happens to be murder mystery / true crime, and what perfect place in Bellingham Academy where a true crime mystery has occurred and has never really been closed or wrapped up. This is the sequel to that, following the events, I believe, like probably a couple weeks or a couple months after the events of the first book. Gives it 2 out of 5 stars. It was just, I don't know if it was just the audiobook or something, but it just was not that great. With the audiobook, I really couldn't tell which male was speaking, and there are a lot of other, like, I suppose masculine voices that are going on within this story that I genuinely couldn't tell what was going on. Some of the characters to me didn't feel, I didn't feel for them. I didn't really understand what they were going through. Not that I could, because I've never been in a situation where a classmate gets murdered. And I'm solving a murder, and I'm going to a very privileged school to learn about said murder. But they're just in general, like, they just felt very flat to me, and I just was not very interested in the story whatsoever. I don't think I'll be continuing on with the series to finish it up. I thought about it. I really tried. There were a lot of mental gymnastics that went through my head to see if I would want to finish it. And then at the end of the day, I just said not to do it. So, not finishing the series, probably will be unhauling Truly Devious, which is very unfortunate because I really like the cover for Truly Devious. Moving on to the books that I did read in the month of October for Trick or Treat-a-thon, I'm going to start off with my lowest rated book, and this fulfills the prompts of Creature of the Black Lagoon and The Invisible Man. And that's going to have to be To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This is a YA high fantasy retelling of The Little Mermaid, only the mermaid is a siren. And you know, the Prince Eric is a pirate who hunts sirens. I give this a 2 out of 5 stars. I did vlog the entire month of October, so I will leave that playlist down below for you guys to watch and enjoy and see exactly what kind of antics Therese got up to while she was trying to read. Namely, moving into this new apartment. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I did not enjoy it. This is a reread of mine, and it was just, there's a lot of potential. The plot is amazing, and I love this version of a retelling where we get a little bit nittier and grittier with this like very beloved Disney and classic storyline. But once the characters met, their personalities just went whoop, whoop. It just went away, and it just was not that intriguing to me anymore. On top of that, I felt like some of the the goals that the main characters had came a little out of left field. I didn't understand exactly why they had them or what the change of heart was there ever, and it just felt really flat to me, and I don't know, it just was not my favorite. So this will be going in the unhaul pile along with Truly Devious. Not my favorite out of the entire bunch. Moving on to one of my more higher rated stories. I believe I gave this a 4.5. I could be wrong. Let me just double check. But moving on to the next prompt that I completed, that is Dracula, and read a book with some gay undertones. And I'm going to have to go with Lord of Eternal Night by Ben Alderson. This is Ben Alderson's next set of series. Homie is pushing out books like a Catholic bunny, I swear. Like, TB and I just barely got done with like The Lost Mage, and then we were like, oh yeah, this is coming out, and then the next one's coming out like next year, plus some more. This is a YA retelling of Beauty and the Beast, following young Jack, who is a witch who is capable of a lot of elemental magic, and is set off to go live with the Beast for the month to try and finally end the curse that the Beast is under once and for all. Whereas Marius is the vampire who once a year receives an offering, and in the end of that month, he ends up kind of losing his head a little bit and killing them. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a really good book. I enjoyed the retelling, and you can tell where he twisted some things to make it fit this narrative a little bit more, rather than having the narrative try to fit the Beauty and the Beast plotline. There were a couple things that dinged me. One, I felt like I didn't really have a good grasp on the curse. I felt like the curse in itself was a little bit lacking, and there wasn't an explanation as to like why it happened or exactly like what it does, because how it is explained is that it makes it sound like Marius loses his head, like, you know, becomes like kind of like newborn vampire, no really control, just very bloodthirsty. But in reality, it was a bit more of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. As well as the love story itself, I felt like it was very rushed and the pacing was very off. It seems to be Ben Alderson's biggest problem that I have seen in his newer books, that pacing tends to be a little bit off. In this case, it's the romance. TB and I both agreed that the romance probably could have used like an extra 50 pages. Just like maybe like a little montage here and there, a little bickering argument, some soft moments to really develop it. Because it felt like they went from hating to lust to love. And the lust to love bit didn't make a lot of sense. Like that jump seemed super rushed and super like just out of left field for me. But I did enjoy it. I will be picking up the sequel when that comes out, because that is a Hades and Persephone retelling. And we all know how much a slut I am for that specific thing. The next book is actually a book, the most recent book that I read, that I literally finished last night, trying to make sure I finished the majority of my prompts for this. It's also the book that I moved some prompts around because I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish my entire TBR. This one fulfills a prompt for Wolfman and Frankenstein. Wolfman being read a book where a character goes through a transformation, and Frankenstein read a book involved where a character through the villain's perspective. Originally that was for Picture of Dorian Gray, but I did not have enough time to read Picture of Dorian Gray, so we had to cut ends and rearrange as such. But that is The Damned by Renee Adjei. This is a YA historical fantasy following young Celine in 1800s New Orleans as she runs away from Paris after a man in Paris tries to sexually assault her, and runs into this kind of hidden and dark world underneath the very allure of New Orleans. This is the sequel, the first book being The Beautiful by Renee Adjei. Love The Beautiful. It was one of my favorite books of 2020. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of different threads that were set up, and each of the characters did in fact go through a pretty large transformation, both emotionally and physically. And we get to see all those internal struggles. The biggest thing for me, and what really dinged this book for me, was that there were so many different threads of plot going on that it was very difficult to keep anything in check, and you didn't know when a plot line specifically was going to end. I also feel like because of so many different threads and like very just a hard time of mixing them all together, it ended up kind of giving the book a sequel syndrome, where it just didn't feel whole or complete. Not to say a sequel should stand on its own, but it just didn't feel like satisfying to read or interesting enough for me to continue reading on with the third book. I will be picking up the third book because, again, loved The Beautiful. This is also a very enjoyable and fun read, and probably one of my more favorite kind of covers in this series, but it's just was not setting up for the third and final book, which I appreciate, but like I said, it does suffer from the sequel syndrome, where there were so many threads going on that I can't tell where the third book is gonna go. Jumping to the first book that I read in the month of October, and this one fulfills the prompt for The Raven, and that is read a book with mental health rep, and that is going to have to be The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Oh, I have not given a lot of trigger warnings for these, but this book does have trigger warnings for murder, death, infidelity, unhealthy familial relationships, murder, I believe talks of suicide, and lots of violence. I ended up giving this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a mystery thriller following a young therapist who is trying to figure out exactly what went wrong in Alice's life. Alice is a case that has been well known in the area, specifically for the fact that she killed her husband and then seemingly went silent after, and the only form of communication we have is the painting she painted where she depicts herself as Alcestis, who is well known in Greek myth, I believe is a Greek tragedy where she sacrifices her life for her husband and then comes back not speaking. Again, a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a wonderful and enjoyable read. Kept me at the edge of my seat and kept me super interested in what was going to happen next. I think the biggest thing that dinged it for me was the pacing of the book. So I felt like more so the framing. How the book kind of framed the big plot twist was really confusing to me, specifically in the sense that you couldn't tell you could tell what was going to happen, but it just, I felt like the build-up just wasn't there for it. But I still enjoyed it nonetheless. I don't know if I'll be picking up The Maidens by him, which is a sophomore novel, since I have heard such mixed things about that book. But I really did enjoy The Silent Patient, and while it did not hit the 5 out of 5 that I wanted it to hit, it's a 4.5 and there's a 5 in there. So this next book fulfills the prompt for Bride of Frankenstein, which is read a book with a toxic or unhealthy relationship, and I'm going to have to go with Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is an adult mystery thriller following young Noemi as she lives in 1950s Mexico and receives a distressing letter from her newlywed cousin. She rushes to the countryside to find out that not everything that is happening in this house is kosher. Trigger warning for sexual assault, scary things, violence, misogyny, some racism, more colorism, but it's still there. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I was smack dab in the middle of my friends, which I knew going in. But I really enjoyed this book. The pacing was the biggest thing that dinged it for me. I think this does stay true to a lot of Gothic literature, just that slow pacing, the long passages, the very creepy, almost, not gaslighty, but really just hard to swallow situations that were going on. It reminded me a little bit of Bly Manor, because we only really live in this one little area, and we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on inside this house. Though, like I said, the one thing that got me was just the pacing. I feel like with a book this short, the pacing should have just been just a smidge bit quicker, not super fast, but a smidge bit, because by the time we reached probably this much is where things started to pick up a little bit more. But I loved it. It's a good homage to Gothic literature, and it does have a nice amount of BIPOC rep. So, well, the main character is Mexican, And the last book fulfills a prompt for Phantom of the Opera, and that is read a book with a love triangle, and that is going to have to be Crave by Tracy Wolff. This is a YA paranormal romance that is coined as the feminist Twilight. How? I don't know, because Twilight isn't super feminist, so you really only have up to go. But this follows young Grace as she travels to Alaska to a very well-esteemed academy after the death of her parents. There she meets Mysterious Jackson and finds out that not everything in this academy is exactly what it says it is. I gave us there is death, there is violence, attempted murder, all those things. I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It's not like, don't get me wrong, like, I love it. It is like definitely peak literature, but it's also not peak literature. I think it's just a fun, turn your brain off read. Super intriguing to me. I think the one thing that dinged me, that made this more on the lower end of a 5 rather than the upper end, was that the ending was just very confusing, and the pacing was like, this chunk of the book is literally like 3 days. But I still really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to read the sequel. I just love having a good book that you can turn your brain off and just soak up just soak it up. It's just that good. But yeah, I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already, but if you have, let me know in the comments. But that is it for the books that I read during the month of October. If you guys have read these books or I have somehow inspired you to read them, let me know in the comments. I'll have all my Goodreads reviews linked down below for you guys that will include trigger warnings, because these books do have some trigger warnings on you, so just be a little wary of that. But until next time, hopefully you guys are having a wonderful weekend. If not, hopefully your next week gets better for you. Bye!